I'm going to answer the question that we have all asked at some point in the last couple of years: what is wrong with people? Right? Actually, I do think we've said that more times in the last few years than before 2020. I can't really tell you what's wrong with all people, but we are going to talk about why right now is unusual and why mental health challenges are different from any at the scale that we're talking about that we've experienced before, and what is different about this situation. Why is it so complicated? So first, in June of 2021, there was a Gallup survey that showed that 60% of Americans felt that they were thriving. That was mid-June 2021. About a week later, well, that week, the most frequent word in articles about COVID was emerge. A week later, the most frequent word in articles about COVID was Delta, right? So all of a sudden, people felt like they were about to emerge, and they were not. After the 4th of July, which I think in the US at least marks a kind of beginning of summer, like this is really summertime, and I think people were really hoping back in mid-June when 60% said they were thriving, which by the way was the highest percentage in 13 years. They were not thriving, and then they were like, what's wrong with me? I should be happy, right? I went to a barbecue, I saw a concert, I went out to eat, I'm seeing my friends again, what is wrong with me? And I started to hear from people who were just unable to cope with what was going on. So I heard things like this: I can't deal with this, I just want to sleep under a weighted blanket and listen to spa music until it's over. This is making me realize how much I've dreaded going to work for years. I don't know why it took so long. This makes me want to quit my job, move to California, and spend my days roller skating and following the dead. And I actually did. And I do not regret it one bit. Yeah. So, and then this from a friend of mine shared this with me, a collaborator who was working with an executive team, and she said that one of the leaders on this team said this to her: my days are full of turnabouts. I have to go back on promises, reshuffle priorities, and I second guess too much. This is wearing on me, and I feel like I'm spending hard-earned goodwill. Right? So leaders felt that they were sort of going back and forth. They couldn't make any promises that they could keep. They were working harder than ever, but their feeling of connection to their teams and their employees was really sort of diminishing. So first of all, you see the word "this" in here. What is this? What was happening? You know, why were people all over the place? All of us are experiencing this, but we're coping and adapting in very different ways. And we don't have the patience right now, for very good reason, to understand those differences. So we actually are more agitated with each other than we've been before. You're seeing more incidents of road rage. People are more annoyed with, waiting in line at a grocery store. We're more likely to say, what is wrong with people? I do feel like I should write a book with that title, and each chapter would be a social psychological explanation of what actually is wrong with people. But anyway, this is complicated. And a couple of other themes, I think, have misled us. One is this focus on resilience. That is a word that's been used a lot over the last few years. And what I want to say about resilience is, yes, the fact that we've gotten through this shows that we are resilient, but it hasn't made us more resilient. It's actually made us more fragile. Crisis on top of crisis creates fragility. What it has shown us and what we have become more of is agile. And I think that's important to remember, because it's the agility that's going to get us through this. It's not just the resilience. It's the agility that will move us through this and allow us to innovate and work together in new ways, which I know feels so incredibly daunting right now. So let's look at what happens during crises. So, and when I say crises, I mean sort of large-scale crises like natural disasters. You have 3 phases, and a lot of this research was actually done by studying combat soldiers in times of war. So what happens during a year for that combat soldier? What you see is in the beginning, we have the emergency phase. And in the emergency phase, the threat feels urgent, goals are shared, the objective is very clear, energy is high, adrenaline is pumping, teams thrive, and good leaders operate at their best. They become great leaders in the emergency phase. That was like the first 2 months of the pandemic. Remember when you were not only having meetings with your colleagues, but you were also having like Zoom cocktail hour. And then like 2 months later, people started dropping out of the Zoom cocktail hour, right? That was sort of the emergency phase. A lot of people felt that they were more productive in those 2 months than they had been in a year, the year before that. They found ways to deal. They felt like, we're gonna get through this. I know what the threat is, and obviously it's gonna be over soon, right? So that is the first battle in a war. That's what you see. What happens after that is a result of the depletion of what we call surge capacity. So psychologists, by the way, you've like taken Psych 101 today, which is pretty amazing. I mean, just in the last few hours. Surge capacity is this collection of adaptive systems that are both mental and physical that we draw on for short-term survival in acutely stressful situations. So it's our nervous system serving us to get through that emergency phase. But it's not limitless, right? It's not infinite. It gets depleted. And when it gets depleted and that crisis is not over, we go into the regression phase. And it's literally called regression because people act like children. And what you see is that all of a sudden there's uncertainty about the goals and the objectives and the threats. There's a loss of control. There's social disconnectedness. Teams start to work not so well together. The urgency doesn't seem as pressing. Sense of purpose is confusing. People are exhausted and depressed and irritable and all of the things, everything. They're withdrawn. Leaders and teams really struggle. And when you don't get respite, how do you sort of fill that surge capacity again? So we have been going sort of back and forth between this sort of regression phase and this emergency phase for a long time. We want to get to this rebuilding phase. And by the way, I know this is very small font. Please feel free to take photos of the slides if you find it useful. The rebuilding phase is when you move from paralysis to action. It's acceptance. It's like the acceptance phase of grief. And we are grieving. We have grieved. I mean, some people have grieved because they've lost people. Some people are grieving the loss of routines that they loved, or the loss of their children's school experiences, the loss of seeing friends. There's a lot of grieving going on. We are going to move into that acceptance phase, and the future becomes a bit clearer. We have new goals and objectives. We have different roles. Roles can be shifted. There's room for creativity that emerges. And that is, I truly believe, where we are now. Teams shift or might reunite. People can reconnect and sort of re-energize. So the thing is, we're moving into that, but it takes work to make that happen. Recovery and rebuilding doesn't just spontaneously happen. We have to make it happen. So this experience is different from other crises, where we didn't just go from phase 1 to 2 to 3. It hasn't been linear. We're experiencing a very long period of flux at a very sort of high level, and flux that also changes our lives on a daily basis. I don't think any of us has lived through this much flux, and we're not used to that. We're not really built for that. We're now in what we call a liminal state. We're sort of occupying both sides of this ever-moving threshold between threatened and safe. Right? Between optimistic and pessimistic, between things are going well, oh, things are not going well. Right? There's so much flux right now. And so I coined this term pandemic flux syndrome. And it's this feeling of being yanked around back and forth between hope and excitement on the one side, fear and despair during this prolonged liminal state. And the overwhelming set of fluctuating stimuli causes spikes in anxiety for people who tend toward anxiety. So these are the people who were like, I'm going to move across the country and change my life completely, right? And spikes in depression for people who tend toward depression. And those are the people who want to be under the weighted blanket listening to spa music, right? And it activates a primitive desire to protect ourselves. But how do we protect ourselves from this state of flux? We either shut down or we escape to get away from that chaos and to regain a sense of certainty, control, and power. And we've lost all of those, even if we're regaining them. So how do we reclaim our own power and re-empower those around us as we emerge from a worldwide pandemic and enter a new world that will inevitably involve more flux than before the pandemic? How do we get to that rebuilding phase? So I'm going to offer some suggestions that are both geared toward you as individuals and also toward you as leaders. But we have to sort of look at what is underlying this pandemic flux syndrome. Like, what are the sort of psychological processes that are being messed with? And what do we need to restore? First is that humans crave clarity and certainty. So I think in the beginning of the pandemic, people thought there would be just a day when it was declared that the pandemic is over and we're having a parade, and it would be like Armistice Day, and there would be ticker tape, and it became pretty clear that was not happening. So we didn't have any kind of clarity, and that was very disturbing for people. So first, do focus on aspects of your life, whether they're large or small, that you can be certain about, and eliminate uncertainty where you can. Even if it seems small, if there are things that are uncertain and really aren't benefiting you, to hold on to, let go of those. The second comes from a researcher at Wharton named Katie Milkman, and she's a cognitive psychologist, and she says people need a fresh start moment. They need to give themselves a fresh start moment. That you need to decide, when this happens, and it should be something that's going to happen, that you know is going to happen, I'm moving forward. I am just stepping forward. Even if things are not moving forward with me, I am moving forward. For me, it was when I heard a certain song at a Dead show. And when that happened, that song, It's funny, my high school friend was with me, and she filmed me not knowing why I was sobbing, but like tears were streaming down my face, but I was smiling. And it was this incredible relief, because I felt like this is my fresh start moment. I'm moving forward now. This is just what I have to do. Leaders are advised to give their employees a new day one. So you decide what day one is. No one's going to decide for us. You get to decide. I mean, imagine that. If you say, it's been really rough, and I'm not saying that everything's fixed, but this date is going to be our day one. Let's give ourselves a fresh start. So that's a way that we can get at that clarity and certainty. The second is that our surge capacity is depleted. So take breaks from the stimuli that are overwhelming your nervous system, the news. And I know, and I bet in this room in particular, people feel guilty if they don't know what's happening every day. You can't be exposed every day to the flux. Right? So you're allowed to take breaks. Allow yourself. People take breaks from people who are, agitated and combative. That's okay. Take breaks from virtual meetings, and also don't plan meetings as a leader if you really don't need to. Plan meetings when you need to. Make the agenda clear. Leaders, slow down. Communicate thoughtfully and calmly. I know that we have an urge right now to go in like sort of helicopter parents as leaders to control things and to show people that we're there, but we need to slow down and not expect people to be kind of fresh and excited. Leaders, pay attention to the small things that will make people feel better. Like if they are coming back to the office, can you make sort of design choices about the office that involve everyone, that make it more pleasant to be there? Small things. Everyone, check your biases about mental and physical health and how they're affecting how you judge others. This is so important. Yes, we've made strides in dealing with mental health or focusing on mental health in the workplace, but there are still clearly a lot of biases. I mean, think about just the various mental health challenges that people are dealing with. Some of us are dealing with mental health challenges that are related to having had COVID, to long haul COVID. Some people have lost people. And there's so much going on. A recent Harvard Business Review survey found that 85% of people say that a workplace factor is negatively affecting their mental health. And about 75% of workers below the age of 45 say they have left a role because of something negative happening in the workplace that was affecting their mental health. So we still need to check our biases. I still hear from people who mean well, the next sentence they say we're focusing on mental health, and the next sentence does not seem consistent with that, right? So we don't know what's going on for everyone, and we really need to check our biases here. We need to restore power. Carry yourself with power. I know that many of you probably know me as the power posing girl. I'm a woman, but anyway, it's, I still, firmly believe in the effect of carrying yourself in expansive, powerful ways. When we carry ourselves in a way that's self-respecting, we feel self-respecting. Right now we're often at home hunched over our computers, not expanding, not doing the things that make us feel that we can approach threatening situations, that we can be creative, that we can interact with people. So carry yourself in a way that's self-respecting. What did you learn about what worked better for you during the pandemic? Right? Surely you've learned things. Some people feel guilty because they don't want to go back because they say, I really enjoyed working at home. It worked better for me. Don't feel guilty about that. Learn from that. Make those things part of your new work life as much as you can. And leaders, actively engage with and listen to employees. What worked well for them? What didn't work well for them? Don't judge people. What we see clearly in the data is that the organizations that are able to accommodate people's changes in how they're working are doing better. Right? People want a sense of agency. Leaders need to give people as much autonomy as possible, to involve them in decision making, to truly listen to what they have to say, to believe them when they say it worked better for me to work, at a coffee shop. I mean, we need to listen and really hear what people are saying to us. People want a healthier workplace, work life, work interactions. The top reason there are many, many surveys, but the most frequent top reason that people listed for leaving their jobs during the Great Resignation was toxic workplace culture. I mean, and here's what's interesting. A lot of people read that as, oh, it got toxic during COVID. It was already toxic. They just didn't do anything about it. Stepping away from it made them realize how toxic it was, and they didn't want to live with that anymore. So don't settle for less. Listen to yourself. No one should dread going to work, speaking up at work, interacting with other colleagues. Leaders, prioritize making your workplace healthy. People want this more than ever before. That's what's going to help you attract people, retain people, innovate. If there's a problem, listen and address it immediately. Don't send it just to HR. HR is overwhelmed with these issues, and it's very hard for them to untangle what's going on. Right? Leaders need to be involved. Leaders know that nothing affects the bottom line in the end more than building a culture that fosters creativity, community, power, and purpose. And I'm going to leave you with this, and I'm not dismissing the effect that this has had on all of us, but I want us to remember, stand up straight and realize who you are, that you tower over your circumstances. Thank you so much for having me. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you.